Hi, I'm Brad Sugars and welcome to the Business Basics. Today I'm going to talk to you about really the job of an action coach, and my job, I guess, as a business educator, and that's really to change the way you think. It's not to motivate you or to inspire you, it's to get you thinking differently. See, the moment I can get you thinking differently, then I can get you making decisions differently. Different decisions lead to different actions lead to different results. So let's take a look at it. Sometimes in order to make a decision to go forward, we've actually got to go back in time and take a look at how did we end up where we are. So I want to take a few minutes to actually look historically at a few different areas of doing it. The first area we're actually going to look at, and by the way, the word I use here is prognostication. Now it's a word I'm pretty sure was invented by Buckminster Fuller, Dr. R. Buckminster Fuller. Now, Bucky used to, instead of using the term prediction, he used the term prognostication. Now, what did he mean by prognostication? Well, kind of different. See, predicting, he said, was standing in the current moment, predicting the future. He defined prognostication as kind of looking down. If you look down a bow and arrow and you're looking down the arrow, well, from the back of the arrow, you can see right through to where you want it to go. You don't hold the arrow behind and shoot from here. And he looks at prognostication saying, okay, if we start back in time and look down how we got to here, then we've got a pretty good chance of getting to where we want to go or understanding where we want to go. So in taking a look at the third point of prognostication, we're talking about leadership. One of the things with leadership over the years is it's definitely changed. Historically, leadership was, well, who was the leader? The biggest guy in the group, I guess. Because how come? Because if you argued with him, you'd club you over the head and you're done. You know, it's that biggest guy became the fastest guy, the fastest with a gun, the fastest with a sword, the fastest with, you know, anything. Ultimately became the fastest thinkers, became the biggest and best leaders. You know, those who could think the best, because through technology we went from, you know, if you take a look at it, the point in time where technology took over was, well, I always look back at the arrest of the crime syndicates for tax evasion as when thinking became more important than brawn. You know, the brain finally beat, the pen became mightier than the sword for real at that point in time. Leadership has changed over the years to move from those with the most muscle to those with the most thinking muscle, those with the best ability to think things through and work things through. You know, as we moved through from the guns and the arrows, and by the way, sometimes the smartest person is the one that employs the toughest person. You know, it's always, if you look at it, back in history, the business people employed the best gunslinger. They employed the best swords maker. They employed the best bankers, the best accountants. They employed the best people to help manage and lead their group. You know, and that's really how the job was kind of invented. You know, the job was invented through the master-apprentice system in many ways, where if I was the leader and I wanted someone to take over the job, well, I wanted the best swordsmith working for me. I paid them with the best wine, women, and song. I gave them money to make sure that, you know, they kept making the swords just for me so that my army were the best army in the world. You know, as time progressed, leadership got a little more sophisticated than that. We started to employ these people. We started to actually give them jobs so that they could work for us, so that we could maintain the best leadership position possible. You know, ultimately, we needed to create better workers. So what exploded? The scholastic system exploded to help us create better workers. The production line demanded people who were trained in a certain way to be able to think and do what they needed to do. Less thinking, more doing as they're told. You know, it helped us to specialize dramatically as we created these production workers. So the schooling system, and if we take a look at it, one of the most interesting parts of the schooling system, John Taylor Gatto wrote a great book called Dumbing Us Down. He was New York School Teacher of the Year, I think like 3 years in a row. And he talks about how the scholastic system started way back in the Prussian days, and the kindergarten, the garden of children, and you know, it's really interesting when you start to study some of these things as to exactly how we created a system to create workers. To create good soldiers was the first intent of the scholastic system. People who would be good, do as they're told, follow the rules, and think the way they were taught to think. You know, and ultimately this, if we look at the scholastic system today, it hasn't changed very much. You know, rote learning is still the way if you can read it and think it back. I still remember having a chat with my grandmother many years ago, and she asked me the question of, how's logic class doing? And I'm like, sorry, Grandma, we don't do logic. She said, well, how's ethics class? Sorry, Grandma, we don't do ethics. You know, it's kind of interesting how the schooling system has changed, and it's changed to create great workers, people who are very good at doing as they're told, people who are very good at following orders. You know, Gatto's book was kind of a really interesting read when it comes to understanding how and why that came about. You know, it's not always, I don't agree with every single part of it, but I know there's some very interesting things in there. Some of the things we learn in the schooling system, if you look at, you know, we learn about the bell curve. Bell curve's an interesting one to learn off. Stick with your own class. Read this story and read it. If you can tell it back to me, it's good. There's only right or wrong. You get a tick or a cross. You know, some of these, I guess it's contextualization. Some of the context we learn in school is very important. Some of the positive contexts you learn in school, you know, you've got to do the work on your own. You've got to go and do your own research. Some of the negatives, other people grade you. You don't grade yourself. You know, it's amazing to me that in business, you know, we still get graded. In school, I always thought that it'd be a fairer way to mark the teacher as to whether, you know, we were a good class or not. If the teacher performed well, then the class got good grades. It's kind of like a coach in sport. If the team wins, the coach gets good grades. If the team loses, the coach gets fired. Well, why isn't that the same for a scholastic class? It'd be an interesting way to have it, wouldn't it? You know, a very, very simple thing that comes from all of this. Here we are sitting in a society that's taught us to be good employees. We're in a society that's taught us to, you know, be good, do as you're told, follow orders, follow the leader. And then we go into business for ourselves. You know, when you get into business for yourself, I don't want you being good, doing as you're told. I want you thinking for yourself. I want you challenging the norms. I want you getting out there and actually making your own decisions. And that's one of the biggest challenges for business owners, starting to make your own decisions, starting to get out of all of that training of being a student and an employee where you've been trained for years and years to be good, do as you're told in many ways. Not all the time, but in many ways. And here we sit, we've got to get into business and start thinking for yourself, challenging the way others think, challenging the way things are done. It's why oftentimes those that didn't do well in school are sometimes the greatest business people. I'm Brad Sugars, and these are the Business Basics.